In a small, quiet neighborhood, there lived a young boy named Marcus. He was only 12 years old, but he had a heart as big as the world. Everyone who knew him would say he was always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need, whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or picking up litter in the park. Marcus was always doing something good. He had learned from his parents the importance of kindness, respect, and helping others. One warm summer afternoon, as Marcus was playing with his friends in the park, something unexpected happened. The sun was shining brightly, and the park was full of people enjoying the day. It was the perfect afternoon for a game of soccer or a picnic. But then, from across the park, Marcus saw an elderly man stumbling and falling to the ground. The man had collapsed right in the middle of the walking path. Without thinking, Marcus ran towards the man, leaving his friends behind. He could tell that the man was struggling to breathe. His chest was rising and falling erratically, and his face had turned pale. As Marcus reached the man, he remembered the first aid lessons he had learned in school. He knew that this could be serious, and he had to act quickly. Kneeling beside the man, Marcus called out to him, trying to get his attention, but there was no response. Marcus's heart raced, but he stayed calm. He knew he had to act fast. The first aid instructor at school had taught him how to perform CPR, and Marcus knew it might be the only way to help the man. He checked the man's pulse. There was none. Marcus placed his hands on the man's chest, just like he had been taught. He pushed down firmly and rhythmically, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3. Marcus kept his focus, making sure he didn't stop. He had heard that every second counted in an emergency like this. As he continued performing chest compressions, he noticed a few people in the park had started to gather around, watching the scene. Some people were whispering, others were calling 911. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens grew louder as paramedics rushed toward them. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly took over. They examined the man and started using their equipment to keep him stable. Marcus stepped back and watched in relief as the paramedics worked. After a few moments, the man's chest began to rise and fall more steadily, and his color slowly returned. He was still unconscious, but it was clear that Marcus's quick actions had saved his life. The paramedics praised Marcus for his bravery. They told him that if he hadn't acted so quickly, the man might not have made it. Marcus felt a sense of pride and relief wash over him, but he was also a little nervous. He had just done something so important, but he didn't know what would happen next. He hadn't expected this to turn into something so serious. As the man was loaded into the ambulance, one of the paramedics turned to Marcus and said, "You did a great job, son. You saved a life today." Marcus smiled but felt a little embarrassed. He didn't feel like a hero. He had just done what anyone would have done in the same situation. Little did he know, this simple act of kindness would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The day seemed to return to normal, but Marcus had no idea that what happened next would make headlines. His life was about to take an unexpected turn. The next day, Marcus went about his usual routine. He had woken up early, eager to finish his chores and head out to the park. He still couldn't quite believe what had happened the day before. Saving someone's life was not something a 12-year-old boy expected to do. It felt strange, almost unreal. As he was doing his homework, the doorbell rang. Marcus rushed to the door, thinking it was probably one of his friends or maybe his mom asking him to help with something. But when he opened it, he was taken aback. Standing in front of him was a tall man in a suit, along with a woman who appeared to be his assistant. Both of them looked very professional, and they smiled warmly at him. "Hello, Marcus. My name is Mr. Thompson, and this is Mrs. Stevens," the man said in a calm and friendly voice. "We're here because of something very important that happened yesterday. May we come in?" Marcus blinked, unsure of what to say. Sure," he said, stepping aside to let them in. The two of them walked into the living room, and Marcus sat down, still trying to figure out who they were and why they were here. "We want to thank you for your quick actions yesterday. Mr. Thompson continued. You saved a life. My father, Mr. William Adams, is the man you helped. Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, you mean the man I helped was your father? He asked. Yes, Mr. Thompson replied, nodding. My father is Mr. Adams, the elderly man you saved. He's a very important person in our community, and your bravery has made all the difference. We're very grateful for what you did. Marcus felt a bit overwhelmed by the news. He had no idea that the man he had helped was someone important. It made him feel both proud and nervous at the same time. We wanted to come by and personally thank you for your actions, Mrs. Stevens added. But there's more. Mr. Adams is so grateful for what you did that he's requested a meeting with you. Marcus was stunned. A meeting with me? He repeated, not sure what to make of it. But I didn't do anything special. I just helped. Marcus, Mr. Thompson said, smiling. You did something extraordinary. You stayed calm, you acted fast, and you saved my father's life. That's not something everyone can do. My father wants to meet the young man who helped him, and we thought it would be a good idea to invite you to his office tomorrow. Marcus felt his heart race, an invitation to meet someone important, a man who had been saved because of his actions. It was all a bit too much for him to handle, but the excitement and curiosity were impossible to ignore. Tomorrow? Marcus asked, feeling a bit uncertain. I don't know if I can. I don't know what to say. You don't need to worry, Mrs. Stevens reassured him. Just be yourself. Mr. Adams is very kind, and he'll be happy to meet the person who gave him a second chance. The visit ended with the promise of more to come. As Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Stevens left, Marcus felt like his world had just shifted. What would this meeting mean for him? What was going to happen next? His simple act of kindness had somehow changed his life overnight, and he couldn't wait to find out how. The following day, Marcus was filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never been invited to meet someone as important as Mr. William Adams. The idea of going to a place where successful people worked made him feel like he was stepping into a completely new world. But despite his nerves, he was eager to see what would happen. Marcus's mother, who had been just as surprised as he was by the visit, decided to come along for support. She knew how important this meeting was for Marcus, and she wanted to make sure he felt comfortable. Together, they took a bus into the city. The ride felt long, and Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what was about to happen. When they arrived, Marcus looked up at the building. It was tall, shiny, and had a sense of importance about it. The name on the building's sign read Adams Enterprises. It looked like something out of a movie, and Marcus could hardly believe he was about to step inside. A kind receptionist greeted them at the entrance and led them to an elevator. The elevator doors opened to a floor with sleek glass walls and large windows that looked out over the city. Everything in the building was spotless and orderly. Marcus felt out of place in his simple clothes, but his mother reassured him that he looked just fine. Finally, they were led into an office, where Mr. Adams was waiting. The elderly man sat behind a large desk, and though he was in a suit, he smiled warmly when he saw Marcus and his mother. Marcus, I'm so glad to meet you, Mr. Adams said, standing up to shake his hand. You've done something incredible, something I'll never forget. Marcus, still nervous, shook his hand. I didn't do anything special, Mr. Adams, he said, trying to downplay the situation. I just helped when I saw you needed it. Mr. Adams smiled. You did more than help. You saved my life. That is something many people would have been too afraid to do. I'll always be grateful to you for your quick thinking. Marcus felt a little embarrassed by all the praise, but he also felt proud. He had never expected anything like this. The meeting went on, and Marcus found himself becoming more comfortable as they talked. Mr. Adams shared stories about his life, how he built his company from the ground up, and how much he valued kindness and bravery. Marcus, Mr. Adams said, after a while, I know you're just a boy, but I can see something in you. "You have a good heart. You remind me of myself when I was your age, always wanting to help, always willing to do what's right, no matter the situation." The words made Marcus feel like he had been given a gift. He had always wanted to make a difference, but never thought he could have an impact like this. After the conversation, Mr. Adams turned to his assistant, Mrs. Stevens, who had been quietly standing by. "Let's set up a scholarship for Marcus. He deserves an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to do amazing things in this world." Marcus's mother gasped, clearly overwhelmed. "A scholarship?" she asked. "But why?" "Because," Mr. Adams said with a gentle smile, "it's the least I can do for the young man who gave me a second chance at life. Marcus's future is bright, and I want to help make sure he has every opportunity to succeed." Marcus could hardly believe his ears. A scholarship. He had always dreamed of going to a good school, but he never imagined something like this would happen to him. He looked at his mother, who had tears in her eyes, and then back at Mr. Adams. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. Mr. Adams nodded. "You've earned it, Marcus. Now, go and do something great with it." With those words, Marcus's life began to change. What started as a simple act of kindness had now opened doors to a future he never thought possible. As he left Mr. Adams's office that day, Marcus felt like anything was possible. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Marcus. After his meeting with Mr. Adams, things started to change in ways he never expected. The scholarship that Mr. Adams had promised was confirmed, and Marcus couldn't believe it. It was a full scholarship to one of the best schools in the city, where he would receive a top-notch education. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like his dreams were within reach. His mother was so proud. She had always worked hard to provide for him, but seeing him receive this opportunity made her believe that there was something even better waiting for him. Together, they celebrated the news, and Marcus promised his mom that he would make the most of this chance. The day Marcus visited his new school for the first time, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The campus was huge. There were multiple buildings, sports fields, and a library that looked like it belonged in a movie. He could hardly believe that he, a kid from a neighborhood where opportunities were rare, was now stepping into a place that seemed so far from the life he knew. Marcus made his way to his first class, a history lesson, and sat down at a desk near the front. He could feel the eyes of the other students on him. Many of them were dressed in the latest fashion, with laptops open and phones in hand. Marcus, who had always been a little shy about his clothes and background, sat quietly, trying not to stand out too much. But as the class began, something surprising happened. The teacher, Mr. Thompson, greeted the students with a warm smile and an energy that immediately made the room feel welcoming. He didn't treat Marcus any differently from the others. In fact, he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know his students. "Marcus, is it?" Mr. Thompson asked, looking at the seating chart. "Where are you from?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm from the east side of the city." "Ah, the east side," Mr. Thompson said, nodding. "We get a lot of talented students from there. I'm sure you'll fit right in." That simple exchange made Marcus feel a little more comfortable. The teacher didn't judge him based on where he came from. Instead, he focused on who Marcus was as a person. That made a big difference for Marcus, who had grown up feeling like people often saw his background before they saw him. As the weeks went by, Marcus began to settle in. His classmates were curious about his story, and while some were skeptical at first, most of them were kind and eager to get to know him. He made a few friends, including Brian, a smart and outgoing student who loved to play basketball. Brian invited Marcus to join him after school for a game, and it didn't take long before they became friends. One afternoon, after a tough day of classes, Marcus sat with Brian in the school cafeteria. They talked about everything: sports, life, and, of course, the scholarship that Marcus had received. Brian was impressed by Marcus's story and often reminded him how lucky he was to have such a chance. "Man, "You've got a whole future ahead of you," Brian said. "I know you're going to do something big." Marcus smiled. He felt like he was starting to find his place, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. There were still many challenges ahead, and he would have to work hard to prove that he deserved the scholarship and the trust Mr. Adams had placed in him. But for the first time in his life, Marcus felt hope in his heart. He had always wanted to help others and make his mother proud, but now he had the chance to do so much more. He had the chance to change his life and the lives of those around him. As he walked home that day, Marcus thought about everything that had happened. The kindness of a stranger, the help of his classmates, and the support of his mother had given him a new sense of purpose. It wasn't just about the scholarship anymore. It was about the future, and Marcus was determined to make it count. As the months went by, Marcus's life began to settle into a routine. He was getting used to his new school, making friends, and excelling in his classes. But despite all the progress, there were still moments when he felt like an outsider. It was a constant struggle to remind himself that he belonged in this world of opportunity, a world that felt so different from where he came from. One of the biggest challenges Marcus faced was adjusting to the pace of his new school. The work was harder, and the expectations were higher. He often spent hours studying after school, trying to keep up with his classmates. At times, it felt overwhelming, but he reminded himself of the scholarship he had received and the promise he had made to his mother. He couldn't afford to give up. One afternoon, Marcus sat in the library, staring at a textbook full of information he was struggling to understand. The chapters seemed endless, and his mind wandered. He thought about the days when he would play basketball with his friends after school, or when he and his mom would sit together, talking about their hopes for the future. Those moments felt like a distant memory now, buried under the weight of his responsibilities. Just then, Brian walked into the library, a wide grin on his face. "Hey, Marcus, you coming to the game this weekend?" he asked, his voice full of excitement. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know, man. I've got a ton of work to do. I'm just trying to keep up with all these assignments." Brian sat down next to him, his expression softening. "I get it, but you can't just bury yourself in books all the time. You need a break. You're working hard, but you also need to live a little. Trust me, you'll burn out if you don't give yourself some space." Marcus looked at his friend, considering his words. He knew Brian was right. He had been so focused on his studies that he hadn't taken time to enjoy life. He hadn't played basketball in weeks, and he hadn't hung out with his friends outside of school. His world had become nothing but homework and deadlines, and he realized that it was starting to take its toll on him. "Maybe you're right," Marcus said, a small smile forming on his face. "I'll come to the game. It's been too long." As Marcus attended the basketball game that weekend, he remembered the feeling of freedom he once had. The game was fast-paced, and he laughed along with his friends, feeling the tension ease from his shoulders. For the first time in a while, he realized that balance was important. His studies were crucial, but so was his happiness, and he needed both to succeed. The next week, Marcus continued to focus on his studies, but made sure to take breaks, whether it was playing basketball, hanging out with friends, or even just walking in the park. Slowly, he found that when he allowed himself moments of joy, he could be more focused and productive when it was time to work. But the challenges weren't over yet. As the year went on, Marcus still faced moments of doubt. He still sometimes wondered if he was truly meant for this new life, but every time he felt like quitting, he remembered Mr. Adams's words. "You belong here, Marcus. You've earned it." That reminder pushed him forward, and as the year drew to a close, Marcus could see how much he had grown. He was no longer the shy boy from the east side of the city. He had become someone with a future, someone with potential. He was determined to keep moving forward, not just for himself, but for the people who had helped him along the way. As Marcus walked home from school one afternoon, he thought about the road ahead. He knew there would be more challenges, but now he felt ready to face them head-on. With the support of his friends, the lessons he had learned, and his own determination, he knew that he was on the path to something great. And as for the boy who had once been uncertain of his place in the world, he had found his footing, and he wasn't going to stop now. Marcus had come a long way since the day he helped the old man, and as time passed, he continued to grow and learn. However, life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. One bright Monday morning, as Marcus walked to school, a thought weighed heavily on his mind. The transition to a new life, while exciting, had not been easy. He had moments of self-doubt, moments when the pressure seemed too much to handle. But he had learned to push forward, one day at a time. At school, Marcus's grades had been improving steadily. He was no longer at the bottom of his class. He was making progress, but he still faced challenges. Some students, especially the ones from wealthier families, still looked down on him, their sneers making him feel like an outsider. But he held his head high and kept moving forward, knowing that the future held endless possibilities. One day after school, Marcus sat on a bench in the park near his house. His mind wandered as he thought about the future. He had always dreamed of becoming a doctor, of using his skills to help others. He was determined to make that dream a reality. But how would he pay for college? How could he afford the tuition fees and other expenses? It was a question that haunted him every day. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Mr. Adams, the kind man who had given Marcus the scholarship that had changed his life. The message read, "Marcus, I have some exciting news for you. I've spoken with the scholarship committee, and they have decided to offer you a full scholarship to a prestigious university. This is your chance to make your dreams come true." Marcus couldn't believe his eyes. A full scholarship. It seemed like a dream. He quickly called Mr. Adams to confirm the news. And sure enough, it was true. He had been given a golden opportunity, one that most people could only dream of. Excited and overwhelmed, Marcus didn't know what to say. He thanked Mr. Adams profusely, feeling a sense of gratitude that was beyond words. This scholarship was not just a way to pay for his education. It was a ticket to a brighter future, one where anything was possible. As Marcus walked home that day, he couldn't stop smiling. He thought about his family, his friends, and all the people who had supported him along the way. He thought about his mother, who had always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. He had made it this far, and now, with the scholarship, he had a real chance to go even further. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he reflected on his journey. From the shy, uncertain boy who had helped an old man in need, to the young man who had earned a scholarship to one of the best universities in the country. He had come so far, but he knew that this was only the beginning. There were still many hurdles to overcome, and the road ahead would not always be easy. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was in control of his future. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, ready to face the challenges ahead. He had a new sense of purpose, and the scholarship was the key to unlocking his potential. As he walked to school, he knew that this was the beginning of something truly special. The boy who had once wondered if he was good enough now had the confidence to prove that he was. And with that confidence, Marcus knew that he would achieve everything he had ever dreamed of. The months passed, and Marcus's life began to change in ways he never imagined. The scholarship had opened doors for him. But the journey was far from over. College life was demanding, filled with new challenges and experiences that tested his limits. But Marcus had learned something important during his time in high school. The harder the challenge, the greater the reward. He was studying harder than ever before, waking up early every morning and working late into the night. He was focused on his dream of becoming a doctor, and every step he took seemed to bring him closer to that goal. But even though things were going well, the pressure sometimes felt overwhelming. There were days when he questioned whether he was good enough, whether he could really achieve his dream. One of the most difficult parts of his college life was adjusting to the culture. Marcus, coming from a working-class background, found it hard to fit in with some of his wealthy classmates. They had different experiences, different lifestyles, and often They didn't understand the struggles he had faced. But Marcus refused to let these differences hold him back. He knew that his path was his own, and he wasn't going to let anyone tell him what he could or couldn't do. Then one day, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. It was from a doctor at a prestigious hospital, the kind of place he had dreamed of working one day. The doctor introduced himself and explained that he had heard about Marcus's academic achievements and the incredible things he had been doing at school. The doctor invited Marcus to intern at the hospital, offering him a unique opportunity to work alongside some of the best medical professionals in the country. Marcus couldn't believe it. This was everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of. An internship at a top hospital was a huge step toward becoming a doctor, and it was the kind of opportunity that many people never even got the chance to experience. But Marcus wasn't just grateful. He was determined. He knew that this was his moment to prove himself. When he told his family the news, they were overjoyed. His mother, who had supported him through every hardship, was especially proud. She had always believed in him, even when others didn't. Her unwavering faith in Marcus was something that kept him going, even when the road ahead seemed impossible. With the internship opportunity in hand, Marcus threw himself into his work with even more focus. He spent hours reading medical journals, learning new skills, and preparing himself for the demanding work that lay ahead. He knew that this was his chance to make a real difference in people's lives, and he wasn't going to waste it. But as the days passed, Marcus realized that this journey wasn't just about getting a degree or landing a great job. It was about the lives he could touch, the people he could help. He thought back to the old man he had helped years ago, and how that moment had set everything in motion. That simple act of kindness had led him to where he was now, a young man on the brink of his dreams, with the power to change the world. And so, Marcus continued to push forward, step by step, knowing that no matter how hard the journey became, he had the strength and determination to see it through. He was no longer the shy, uncertain boy he once was. He had grown into someone who believed in himself, someone who was ready to make his mark on the world. The future was full of possibilities, and Marcus was ready to embrace them all.